The call for help. The vast observation deck of the Concordia, flagship of the Galactic Alliance, offered a panoramic view of the battlefield, or rather, what remained of it. Admiral Vexlar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous habit that had intensified over the last 3 standard months of relentless conflict. The holographic tactical display confirmed what the naked eye could see. The Alliance fleet was in ruins. 87 ships lost in the last engagement alone, reported Commander Riluxa, her voice carrying the distinctive melodic undertones of the Threxian species. The swarm is regrouping for another push. Projections indicate they will breach our final defensive line within 26 hours. Vexlar's secondary arms folded across his torso, a gesture of deep contemplation among his kind. The primary arms remained at his sides, claws clenching and unclenching as he processed the impossible situation before him. "And our reinforcements?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "None available, Admiral. The Centauri sector fell yesterday. Proxima Defense Hub reports total loss of communication with the Arcturus fleet." The commander's voice remained professional, but her skin's luminescence had dimmed, the Threxian equivalent of pallor. The swarm had appeared 18 months ago, emerging from the uncharted regions beyond the galactic rim. Not a single species, but a collective of bioengineered horrors that consumed everything in their path. The Alliance, a confederation of 37 spacefaring civilizations, had never faced an existential threat of this magnitude before. Their technology, diplomacy, and combined military might have proven woefully inadequate. "There is one option we haven't considered, Admiral," said Strategic Advisor Kelver, who had remained silent until now. The Moravian's crystalline form shifted uncomfortably, indicating reluctance to speak further. "Speak freely, Advisor." The humans. The word hung in the air like a forbidden incantation. Around the command deck, conversations ceased. Even the mechanical hum of the ship's systems seemed to quiet. "The humans are not part of the Alliance," Vexlar stated flatly. "They declined our invitation 50 years ago. Yet they still maintain diplomatic relations," Kelver countered. "And there are stories." Indeed, there were stories. Whispered accounts from merchant vessels and diplomatic couriers. Tales of a species that had somehow survived 3 extinction-level events on their homeworld before achieving spaceflight. A species whose internal conflicts had been so savage that they'd developed military doctrines incomprehensible to other civilized beings. A species that, despite their technological disadvantages, had repelled 2 separate invasion attempts by the Krell Imperium, a feat no other civilization had managed. "The humans have a policy of non-interference in galactic affairs," Commander Riluxa pointed out. "That policy applies to political conflicts." Kelver's crystalline body pulsed with urgency. "This is different. The swarm will not stop at our borders. If the Alliance falls, Earth will eventually face the same threat." Vexlar stared into the void of space, where the distant lights of the swarm fleet were gathering like a malevolent constellation. 50 years ago, the Galactic Alliance had approached humanity with an offer of membership. The humans had politely declined, stating they were still sorting out their own affairs. The real reason, understood but never officially acknowledged, was that humans were considered too unpredictable, too aggressive for the harmony-focused alliance. Now, that very unpredictability might be their only hope. "Open a channel to Earth," the Admiral ordered. "Priority diplomatic frequency." The response came faster than expected. Within 12 minutes, the main viewscreen activated, displaying a human female in a crisp military uniform adorned with insignia unfamiliar to Vexlar. "This is General Maya Chen, Earth Defense Force. We received your priority signal, Admiral Vexlar. How may we assist the Alliance?" The human's directness was refreshing after months of diplomatic caution and strategic hesitation within Alliance circles. "General Chen, I'll be blunt. The Alliance faces annihilation from an enemy force we call the Swarm. Our combined fleet has been decimated. Billions of lives across multiple systems are at imminent risk. And you're reaching out to us for military assistance. The human's expression remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly, calculating, assessing. Yes, we are aware that Earth has maintained a policy of non-interference. That policy exists because the Alliance made it clear our methods were not compatible with your collective values, Admiral. There was no bitterness in her voice, merely a statement of fact. However, from what our intelligence suggests about this swarm, they represent a threat to all sentient life in this sector of the galaxy, including Earth. Vexlar's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. Then you'll help us. I need to consult with the Defense Council and the Secretary General. But preliminarily, yes, send us all tactical data on the swarm, combat recordings, biological analyses, fleet movements, everything you have. Of course. And, General Chen, how quickly could Earth mobilize a response? The human's lips curved slightly upward, what Vexler recognized from cross-cultural training as a smile, though this one didn't seem to convey amusement. Admiral, we've maintained a ready response fleet since the second Krell incursion. If the Council approves, we can dispatch an initial force within 18 hours. The bridge fell silent. The fastest Alliance member species could mobilize a crisis response fleet in 3 days, minimum. That would be most appreciated, General. One more thing, Admiral, Chen added. Our tactics may appear unconventional by Alliance standards. I need your assurance that our commanders will have operational autonomy. Vexlar hesitated only briefly. You have it. At this point, General Chen, the Alliance is open to any approach that might save our worlds. Understood. Earth Defense Force out. True to their word, the human fleet arrived 17 hours later. Vexlar and his senior staff assembled in the main hangar to receive General Chen and her command team. The airlock cycled, and 6 humans entered, 5 in military uniforms, and 1 in what appeared to be civilian attire. Admiral Vexlar. Chen stepped forward, offering the traditional Alliance greeting. A palm raised, fingers spread. Thank you for your welcome. This is my tactical team. Colonel Okonkwo, Major Zhao, Captain Schultz, Lieutenant Commander Patel, and Dr. Kwan, our xenobiologist. The introductions complete, they moved to the Concordia's war room, where a holographic representation of the current tactical situation hovered in the center. Your data package was comprehensive, Chen noted, studying the hologram. But I'd like to hear your own assessment of the swarm's weaknesses, if any. Commander Rillaxa stepped forward. They operate with a hive-mind coordination that makes their movements predictable, but devastatingly efficient. We've observed limited adaptation capabilities. They improve their tactics with each engagement, but slowly. Any biological vulnerabilities? Asked Dr. Kwan, the civilian scientist. Their outer carapace resists conventional energy weapons. Kinetic impacts are more effective, but getting close enough for such attacks is proven costly. Colonel Okonkwo, a tall human with intricate scarification patterns on his temples, studied the movement patterns of the swarm. They operate on swarm intelligence algorithms, distributed but coordinated. Classic efficiency maximizing behavior. Yes, agreed Strategic Advisor Kelver. They prioritize mathematical perfection in their attack formations. Captain Schultz, a stockier human with artificial cybernetic enhancements visible around her left eye, laughed softly. Perfect. They haven't fought humans before. Admiral Vexlar noticed an exchange of glances among the human officers, a silent communication he couldn't interpret. Admiral, General Chen said, the Earth fleet consists of 36 vessels, a small force compared to what you've already lost, but our ships are designed with different priorities than Alliance vessels. Different how? Asked Rillaxa. Alliance ships prioritize efficiency, sustainability, and non-destructive weapon systems, reflecting your cultural values. Our ships are built with the assumption that conflict is chaotic, unpredictable, and often requires creative solutions. The tactical display shifted, showing the approaching human fleet. The vessels were smaller than standard Alliance cruisers, with unusual configurations that defied conventional design philosophy. Some appeared to be heavily armored at the front, with minimal shielding elsewhere. Others were sleek and clearly built for speed rather than sustainable combat. "Your ships are specialized," Kelver observed. "Humans prefer tactical flexibility over perfect balance," explained Major Zhao. "Each vessel class serves a specific function within a coordinated but adaptable strategy." Before further discussion could develop, the alert klaxons sounded throughout the ship. "The swarm has accelerated their approach," announced the tactical officer. "They'll reach our position in 40 minutes. "Earlier than projected," muttered Vexillar. "They're learning." General Chen's expression hardened. "Permission to deploy our fleet, Admiral." "Granted. What's your strategy?" "We'll show you." Chen turned to her team. "Battle plan Thermopylae. Prioritize swarm cohesion disruption." As the human officers hurried to their shuttle, Vexillar found himself both apprehensive and strangely hopeful. For the first time since the swarm appeared, the outcome seemed uncertain rather than inevitable. Commander Riluxa joined him at the observation window as the human shuttle departed for their fleet. "Do you believe they can make a difference?" she asked quietly. Vexillar watched the human vessels begin to move into formation, though formation seemed a generous term for their seemingly haphazard arrangement. "I don't know, but I'm beginning to understand why the Alliance was reluctant to include Earth in our collective. They think differently." The battle that followed defied every principle of space combat that the Alliance had developed over 2,000 years of interstellar civilization. The human vessels didn't form a defensive perimeter. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the swarm fleet, splitting into smaller groups that seemed to move without coordination. Some ships deliberately presented their flanks to enemy fire, a tactical error by any standard Alliance doctrine. "What are they doing?" gasped Kelver as the viewscreen showed a human destroyer absorbing devastating hits from 3 swarm vessels. The answer came moments later when the damaged destroyer suddenly accelerated to maximum velocity and ran directly into the center of a swarm formation. The resulting explosion was magnified by what must have been additional explosive charges placed strategically throughout the human vessel. "They sacrificed their ship," Riluxa whispered in horror. "No," countered Vexillar, now understanding. "They weaponized it." Across the battlefield, the pattern repeated. Human vessels absorbed damage, lured swarm ships into tighter formations, then detonated themselves at critical junctures, each explosion disrupting the mathematical precision of the swarm's movements. The remaining human ships exploited these moments of disarray with devastating effect, firing unusual projectile weapons into the confused clusters of enemy vessels. Some projectiles exploded on impact, while others seemed to attach themselves to swarm ships, burrowing into their hulls before detonating. "They're winning," Kelver stated in disbelief as the tactical display showed swarm losses mounting rapidly. But the victory came at a terrible price. Of the 36 human vessels that entered the battle, only 23 remained when the swarm finally retreated. The observation deck fell silent as the Alliance officers absorbed what they had witnessed. General Chen's voice came through the communication system, calm despite the chaos they had just survived. "First engagement complete. Swarm forces retreating to regroup. Request immediate conference to plan counteroffensive." As the human shuttle returned to the Concordia, Vexillar found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about warfare, about civilization, and about humanity. Turning the tide. The war room of the Concordia had transformed over the 12 hours since the first engagement with the swarm. Where once pristine holographic displays had shown theoretical battle plans, now the walls were covered in physical maps, handwritten notes, and bizarre diagrams, all contributions from the human tactical team. Admiral Vexillar entered to find General Chen and her remaining officers engaged in an animated discussion with Alliance strategic experts. The humans moved differently than most species he had encountered, more physically expressive, gesturing emphatically as they spoke, occasionally raising their voices in what might have been interpreted as aggression, but seemed instead to be passionate emphasis. "Admiral," Chen acknowledged his arrival, "we were just explaining our assessment of the swarm's likely response to yesterday's encounter. They lost 34% of their forward fleet," noted Commander Rilixa. "A significant blow." Colonel Okonkwo, the tall human officer with facial scarification, shook his head. "Numbers are irrelevant with hive structures. They don't think in terms of acceptable losses because they don't value individual units. They'll adapt their approach based on the tactics we deployed." "Meaning?" prompted Vexlar. "Meaning they won't fall for the same tricks twice," Captain Schultz replied, the cybernetic enhancements around her eye glowing faintly as she manipulated a simulation. "They'll adjust their formations to minimize vulnerability to our ramming strategies. They'll develop countermeasures to our magnetic disruptors. Then we change tactics as well," suggested Kelver. General Chen nodded. "Exactly. Humans don't rely on perfect strategies. We rely on strategic flexibility and tactical innovation." Dr. Kwan, the xenobiologist, stepped forward. "We've analyzed the biological samples collected from swarm debris. Their neural network operates on electromagnetic principles, similar to our own technology. This suggests a potential vulnerability." She projected a detailed molecular diagram. "Their communication relies on quantum entanglement at the cellular level. Incredibly efficient, but potentially susceptible to targeted disruption. You're suggesting we could disrupt their hive mind?" Vexlar's four eyes widened at the implications. "Not completely, but we could introduce significant lag into their decision-making process," Dr. Kwan explained. "Even a half-second delay in their coordination would create exploitable chaos." "The Alliance attempted signal jamming in earlier encounters," Rilixa pointed out. "It proved ineffective." Major Zhao, who had been quietly working at a console, looked up. "You tried to block their signals. We're proposing something different, introducing noise into their system. It's like the difference between damming a river and poisoning it." The Alliance officers shifted uncomfortably at the metaphor, but Vexlar noted its accuracy. "How would this be implemented?" he asked. "We've reproposed our remaining scout ships with modified transmission arrays," Captain Schultz explained. "They'll penetrate the swarm's outer defensive shell and broadcast the disruptive signal at close range. Those ships would be sacrifice." Kelver caught himself. "They would not survive such a mission." "The pilots understand the stakes," General Chen said simply. Vexlar studied the human officers. Their casual acceptance of sacrificial tactics troubled him deeply, yet he could not deny their effectiveness. The Alliance had lost thousands of ships and millions of lives trying to preserve their forces while fighting a losing war. The humans seemed to grasp something the Alliance had not. Sometimes victory required terrible costs. "There's something I don't understand," Vexlar said finally. "Your species declined Alliance membership because our collective was too restrictive, too focused on harmony at the expense of individual expression. Yet your military tactics involve significant self-sacrifice. How do you reconcile these perspectives?" The human officers exchanged glances, that silent communication again, before General Chen answered. "Admiral, humans don't value harmony above all else. We value choice. Every soldier in our fleet volunteered with full knowledge of the risks. They choose to potentially sacrifice themselves for something they believe matters more than their individual survival." "What could matter more than survival?" asked Kelver, genuine confusion in his crystalline voice. "The survival of others," Colonel Okonkwo said quietly. "Our families, our civilization, our potential allies." He gestured to encompass the Alliance officers. "You." A profound silence fell over the war room. For species evolved in stable environments with predictable threats, such a perspective was almost incomprehensible. Yet for humans, evolved on a planet with unpredictable disasters, competing predators, and their own internal conflicts, it made perfect sense. The contemplative moment was interrupted by the tactical alert. The main display activated, showing the swarm fleet moving once more, but in an unexpected pattern. They're not approaching directly, Rillixe observed. They're splitting into 3 distinct attack groups. Major Zhao analyzed the data rapidly. They're adapting faster than we anticipated. This formation negates our previous tactics. Then we adapt faster, General Chen stated, turning to Vexlar. Admiral, we need to coordinate with your remaining fleet. The plan we discussed will still work, but the implementation must change. What followed was the most intense strategic session of Vexlar's long career. The humans didn't lecture or dictate. They collaborated, soliciting input from Alliance officers, integrating compatible aspects of Alliance doctrine with their own unorthodox approaches. Within hours, a new battle plan emerged, one that utilized the strengths of both human and Alliance vessels. As the combined fleet moved into position, Vexlar found himself on the bridge of the Concordia alongside General Chen, watching as their forces deployed in a configuration that would have been considered tactically unsound by traditional standards. The Alliance vessels formed a traditional defensive sphere, while the human ships positioned themselves in seemingly random patterns throughout the formation, like predators hiding among prey. The swarm will target our largest vessels first, Chen explained. Their algorithmic targeting prioritizes maximum efficiency, largest threats first. And when they commit to that approach, Vexlar asked, that's when we spring the trap. The battle began precisely as Chen had predicted. The 3 swarm attack groups converged on the Alliance's heaviest cruisers, ignoring the smaller human vessels that appeared to be hanging back from the main engagement. For 30 tense minutes, the Alliance ships absorbed punishment, their advanced shields holding, barely, against the relentless assault. Then, just as several ships reported critical shield failures, General Chen gave the order. Operation Trojan Horse. Execute now. The supposedly retreating human vessels suddenly accelerated to maximum velocity, not toward the swarm ships engaged in combat, but toward a point in space approximately 50,000 kilometers from the battlefield. What are they doing? Kelver demanded. They're leaving the battle. No, Vexlar realized, understanding blossoming. They're targeting something else. At the coordinates the human ships were approaching, space itself seemed to shimmer and distort. A massive structure decloaked, the central control hub of the swarm, hiding behind a biological cloaking field that had rendered it invisible to Alliance sensors. How did you know? Rillixe whispered. Hive structures always protect their queen, Chen said simply. Your sensors were looking for technology. We were looking for behavioral patterns. The human vessels converged on the swarm's command structure, launching their disruption devices directly into its neural core. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the battlefield, swarm ships faltered, their perfect formations dissolving into chaotic individual movements. All Alliance vessels, target the confused swarm ships, Vexlar ordered. Priority to those nearest our critical assets. For the first time in the 18-month conflict, the Allied fleet had a clear advantage. Without their hive mind coordination, individual swarm vessels were formidable but not invincible. One by one, then in groups, they fell to the combined firepower of the Alliance. At the swarm's command hub, the human ships had completed their mission. Of the 12 vessels that had undertaken the strike, only 5 remained intact enough to limp back to the Alliance formation. But they had succeeded. The swarm's central intelligence was shattered. Hours later, when the last enemy ship had been neutralized or had retreated into deep space, the Alliance and human officers gathered once more on the Concordia. The mood was complex. Elation at victory mingled with grief for the tremendous losses suffered by both forces. The swarm has been driven from this sector, Vexlar announced. For the first time, we have hope of not merely surviving, but winning this war. He turned to General Chen and her remaining officers. The Alliance owes Earth a debt we cannot easily repay. You've sacrificed much for worlds not your own. Chen's expression was solemn but determined. That's what humans do. Admiral, we fight hardest for causes beyond ourselves. The Alliance Council will convene in 3 days, Vexler continued. I intend to formally propose that Earth be offered membership again, with full acknowledgement of your unique cultural perspective and military doctrine. The human officers exchanged glances, and Chen smiled. A genuine expression this time, not the predatory one from their first meeting. We would be honored to consider the invitation, Admiral. But perhaps both our civilizations have learned something valuable from this encounter. Indeed, agreed Vexlar. We've learned that true strength comes not from perfect harmony, but from diversity of thought and approach. The Alliance sought to create a single, unified strategy against the swarm, and we nearly perished. You brought chaos to our order, and in doing so, saved us all. Colonel Okonkwo stepped forward. And we've learned that there's value in cooperation beyond emergency alliances. Humans have always been suspicious of losing our identity within larger collectives. But perhaps there's a middle path, one where we can maintain our distinctiveness while still being part of something greater. As the gathering dispersed, Commander Rilixa approached Vexlar at the observation window. Together, they watched the strange, asymmetrical human vessels being repaired alongside the sleek, uniform Alliance ships. They're so different from us, she remarked. Their ships, their tactics, their very way of thinking. Yes, Vexlar agreed. And that is precisely why we need them. Outside, the stars shone on a battlefield littered with the remains of both enemy and Allied ships, a somber monument to the cost of victory. But among the wreckage, repair vessels moved with purpose, and communication channels buzzed with plans for the next phase of the war. The battle had seemed lost until the humans arrived. And now, for the first time since the swarm emerged from the darkness beyond the galactic rim, the light of hope burned bright once more.